Hello and welcome to Strong Message here from BBC Radio 4, a guide to the use and abuse of political language. I'm Matt Forde, and before you panic, I haven't travelled down on an Avanti West Coast to stage a coup. Armando is under the weather this week, so I'm stepping into hosting duties. I have to admit, I'm a little under the weather myself with World Cup fever, which has been slightly tempered by England's performance against Ghana. This week, I'm joined by Ria Lina. Ria, welcome to the show.
Hi. What is this World Cup of which you speak? What are you talking about?
Do you know what? It's some sort of start-up sporting tournament. I don't think it's going to catch on.
No, I can't see it working. I mean, you need everyone to agree. You want at least 40, 45 countries to agree. And I can't see that happening in today's political climate.
The phrase we're going to look at this week is a swift transition. Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds has called for one, so we're going to look into what he means by that and cast our eye over the language of Starmer's tenure and the rhetorical traits of the potentially incoming Andy Burnham. So this idea of a swift transition. After the local elections, there was a bit of a debate about whether we needed a swift or an orderly transition. The code for swift basically meant Wes, orderly meant Andy. Now, Andy is in the swift transition group, and Wes has rode in behind Andy, but both Wes and Andy use the phrase, "We don't want to spend the summer exaggerating our small differences." So, Ria, do you think this is all basically a pretense to avoid a mess?
Avoid a mess? Sorry, are we not in a mess already?
But they might not want a divisive leadership contest while in government.
Well, I think if we do go swiftly or orderly from Keir to Andy, you'd be forgiven if you were an alien and you came down to Earth going, are you sure that's not the same person? Because honestly, you put them next to each other. They are brothers separated at birth.
They both like casual clothing. They both like football. Both working class. The
only difference, I think, is that Keir speaks through his nose and Andy's a little bit more, relaxed about it.
And what about the phrase a swift transition? As a member of the public, do you think, this sounds like a good thing?
Do you know what? I think it's a transition, and the putting swift in there for me doesn't change the fact that we are changing Prime Minister again. It's a transition. I think that the fact that it's now most likely to be uncontested is going to make it better than it otherwise would be if it drags on. Swift or otherwise, it's still going to come with a little bit of mess, isn't it? But
do you think it will resonate with the public? Do the public think, yes, I'd rather this be done swiftly? Or do you think the public think, actually, if we're going to change Prime Minister, we want to see some scrutiny of whoever the new person is, some sort of contest, some sort of legitimacy?
Personally, I'm torn. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm torn, if only by the fact that if we don't have a leadership election, we will have what's known as a coronation. And I don't know if we need to have...
Are left-wing people comfortable with that?
Exactly. I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of a coronation. How do you feel about this being a coronation if we don't have some kind of runoff?
I always think that I understand why the favourite wants to just get on with it and get in.
Yes.
And I think there's maybe a level of public support for just, if he's clearly going to win, what's the point? I also think that for the good of the candidate, actually some scrutiny is good and it sharpens your thinking, and a leadership contest forces policy development, forces debate that effectively then is a pre-season for whatever the general election is. It toughens you up a bit.
I love your use of the word pre-season.
Thank you very much.
It's one of the, in fact, it is a sporting term I would happily bring into politics. I agree with you. There needs to be a bit more pre-seasoning? No.
You sound like it's going to get cooked.
Yeah. It needs to get a bit saltier, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because you do get lots of football phrases finding their way into politics, showing something the red card. I mean, obviously, in Labour politics, certainly historically with the trade unions, lots of strikers. Obviously, one that's been relevant recently that you hear a lot of Labour politicians saying, we need our best players on the pitch. Which actually, arguably, Thomas Tuchel partially disagrees with. Because what he actually says is, you need the best players who will work together as a team. So maybe if Tuchelism was implemented, you wouldn't necessarily have Andy Burnham, although in a way he's a half-time substitution, isn't he? He didn't start the parliamentary term, but he's sure.
Yeah, it's a substitution, right? We're having a substitution in. But I mean, if Tuchelism comes in, I think they'd also have a much smaller majority.
I just always find it odd that, given that choices are the essence of politics and elections are the essence of politics, that you would want to become Prime Minister whilst avoiding some form of electoral process. that it's just so built into the system that votes are part of how you get things through on the floor of the House of Commons, how you got selected, how you got elected, all those things. And yet, to become the leader of a party, leader of a country, there's then a suggestion that sometimes you go, oh yeah, well, we won't have an election this time. Let's just get on with it. You think, well, I think legitimacy matters as well.
I hear that very much, especially in politics. But as an actor, the idea of being handed a role without having to audition, yes, please.
That's different. That's based on talent. That's merit.
It isn't always. Sometimes it's based on your social media following, isn't it? But
the parallels to politics.
Yeah, that's true. At that point, yeah, maybe it is. The people have spoken.
Okay, let's analyse some of the language from Starmer's speech when he announced that he was going to stand down. He said, I don't know whether to do the voice or not. This is Armando's show.
Please do the voice, because I'm going to ask you to do Andy later. So you might as well do Keir now.
6 years ago, I inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially and morally bankrupt.
Strong words, obviously aimed at Jeremy Corbyn, who said it was a disgraceful comment to make. But doesn't Starmer have to make this point? Because in a way, his most unequivocal achievement is making the Labour Party electable again. You can argue about the job he's done as Prime Minister. But in a way, I guess that's pretty indisputable. He also said,
I know the question being asked now is not who was best placed to change the Labour Party, to take us into power and to begin the vital work of improving lives of millions of people. Those questions have been answered. The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Which seems to be a bit of a linguistic trick, trying to frame the PLP as the ones demanding a change in leadership rather than the country. So it's effectively a pre-resignation speech, and we will get the proper one when he eventually leaves in a few weeks' time. But how does this compare to other pre-resignation speeches?
I mean, he packed so much into 6 minutes. I was really impressed.
Like an open spot proud.
He really did. I mean, I personally didn't feel that now was the time to separate himself from the previous Labour Party, you know, with that line, as you did so beautifully, that he inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially, and morally bankrupt. I think that given... You're right. He made it an electable party, but I think that also had a lot to do with 14 years of Tory in government. I think that he could have pointed to the opposition rather than kicking half of the Labour Party on his way out. Like, why do that? I mean, part of the issue of why you were being asked to leave, whether by your party or whether by the country, is because there was so much discord that you weren't able to unify within your own party. So why kind of do that little dig?
I guess he would say that he's trying to remind people of his key achievement, which is when he took over, people were saying the Labour Party might not even exist in 2 years' time. It was under investigation by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. We'd never seen the Labour Party get itself into that sort of state. So he's just trying to remind the Labour Party, I guess, at that point, don't forget what I did for you, was that when I took it over, it's easy now to see, well, we're a party of government and it's easy to get on. When I took over, that wasn't the case.
And I would have said that 6 months or a year ago, when he started to really get in trouble, that was the time to remind us of that. But right now, he's gone up and over the hill. We're almost at a point where we're not sure if the Labour Party is electable again. So don't remind us that you got us to a point of election as you are leaving because you have then possibly made the Labour Party unelectable again. But also I found this kind of made me chuckle when he said that he accepted the answer to all these questions that were being posed. He accepted the answer that he needs to go with good grace, because he gave this speech at 9:30 on a Monday morning, whereas on the Friday, right before the weekend, he was saying, if there's a leadership race, I'm going to run it. So I'm like, the good grace that your wife had to take you away for a weekend and go, Keir, give up already. Like, you're done.
You know, it's interesting seeing that language change over a weekend from I will stand. I guess at that point, you're kind of bluffing. You're trying to make Andy Burnham blink, or Wes Streeting, or whoever.
I think that if Wes hadn't conceded, then he may well have still hung in there, because then there would have been votes up for grab, I think. And that's why I think Wes and Andy said, we don't want to spend the summer exaggerating our small differences. They realized that if they fought each other, that Keir stood a chance of staying in power, so that one of them had to concede.
Also, I love the idea that the Labour Party wouldn't want to exaggerate small differences. I mean, if it's one thing the Labour Party exists to do to itself, it is exaggerate the small differences in policy between one wing and another.
Oh, right. You mean the politically, financially, and morally bankrupt side, and then the other side.
And the good people, whoever they are.
And the great ones.
Let's compare it to some other pre-resignation speeches. Boris Johnson in July 2022. As I've seen in Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful, and when the herd moves, it moves. Slightly more poetic than Starmer.
Sorry, is that the herd moving to get him out, or is that how they partied? Is that how they danced?
Both.
Is that the dance? Okay.
Yeah, they partied so hard they herded against him.
I found that Boris and Keir's resignation speeches were very similar. I felt that they came from very similar places. There was that intense feeling of, this isn't up to me. I didn't make this decision. I still think I'm the best man for the job. This is not my choice.
He must feel like he only won an election 5 minutes ago, and that this has all happened very, very quickly, and his language reflects that. Yeah, Boris had also said, I know there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed, and I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world, but them's the breaks. See, a bit of levity on the end kind of helps.
It does, but also I think it is very levacious. What's
Levitating?
Levitating? It's very levitating for him to say, I'm giving up the best job in the world, when we all know how much he struggled on the very small paycheck. I'm so sorry to be leaving office to go make way more money than I'm actually worth. So I can't do the voice.
It wasn't a bad go.
It was no, but yours is better.
But do you think Starmer could learn a bit from that? You know, had he put a bit of levity in? I mean, maybe he will with his final speech.
Has he been levitatious at all? I'm just going to keep trying until we get a word. He hasn't. He's never been very good at mixing. I mean, we know that Boris is the king of that. Boris is excellent at being able to weave in his humor, and he has far more control of the room than people think he does, with all of the stammering and the stuttering. But it's all quite intentional. It's all part of the style and the performance. Whereas I think Keir Starmer's ironically never been that comfortable performing in public, even though he was a QC.
So do you think actually had he forced himself to have moments of levity, that might have helped in any way? Had he occasionally said, but them's the breaks? Might have given him an extra couple of weeks.
You know what? It's interesting. It doesn't quite work. I think that we all, regardless of how you felt about the job he was doing, we all felt for him when his voice cracked at the end of that speech. And he said, I'm going to go and be the best husband to Vic and the best father I can be to my children, whom I'm very proud of. And and it's interesting. I found it very interesting that he said, I'm very proud of my children, because when he said halfway through the speech that becoming prime minister was the proudest moment of my life, the first thing I thought was, what about when your kids were born? What about your children? Yeah. So, he brought it
back. What about Arsenal winning the league?
Oh, well, I mean, he was there. What about when you got Taylor Swift tickets and didn't have to pay for it?
The glasses, the jacket. Come on. How many proud moments in your life? So let's contrast him to Andy Burnham. What can we look for in Andy Burnham's style of communication?
They do communicate very differently. We've just heard you do Keir Starmer through, that whole very nasal kind of thing. How does Andy Burnham differ?
So my Burnham impression isn't one of my best, but he has quite a soft, quite a slight sort of hesitancy, isn't there, Ria? He will ask himself questions a lot, won't he? And I think one of the things we really need to do is, improve things, don't we? And I think having conversations like this really helps, doesn't it? And that can sound consensual, can't it? But it can also sound quite unsure as well. And he will also go, from levity to serious very quickly. Nothing I love more than, coming on here and talking to you and, having a laugh and, talking about language. I think it's great. But, in all seriousness, if the Houthis don't stop doing what they're doing, we will use lethal force. And you're like, the pivot.
Just through that right. Whoa.
The pivot is fast. So look out for that. But he has certainly a more, quite a gentle way that he speaks, quite a soft, pleasant voice. I mean, I think you're right. I don't think linguistically, him and Starmer are quite similar in many ways, in that there's a sort of nervousness about them. They don't have that assuredness that say, Blair had.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they don't have that public schoolboy feel to them, do they? And I think that's why, Andy Burnham, of course, King of the North, man of the people, these are all phrases that we would very much associate with him and with his way of communicating, because he comes across as a real person. I think Keir Starmer, Keir Starmer people struggle with, first of all, because, of course, he is Sir Keir Starmer, for his service to the country, but it separates him from the humble beginnings that he came from. I don't know if you know this, Matt, but his dad was a toolmaker.
No
Yes.
way.
Yeah, and his mom was a nurse. So I know he's just one of us.
You should have mentioned it.
He really,
We would have bonded with him more.
He might still be prime minister if he did. So they do have a lot of similarities. There is that certain humility. There's that lack of bombacity. But I do think that there is still, within the scale of Labour, there is a difference. And I think that Andy is representing, and I think Wes probably even recognizes that he's a little bit too slick. And I think Wes, on the balance of it, went, I'm probably closer to Keir Starmer than Andy is. And if we want a hope of being re-electable in up to 2.5 years, then maybe Andy is the person that I need to throw my weight behind. Sort of like in a Gove Boris kind of way 10 years ago.
Oh, it's
how well that went.
These are calculated chess moves, aren't they, depending on when you think you can win and when you think you can't. Something you said I think is really interesting is that think around the language we're using around Andy Burnham, King of the North, coronation. Tony Blair said something really interesting a few years ago about whenever a leader comes in, the sort of seeds of their downfall are always quite visible. That whatever the things are, these things will escalate eventually. You can always sort of see what the pitfall might be. And I just wonder if having that sort of regal language around him, however lighthearted and however sort of flippant it is now, if there's a sense that he didn't have to stand in a leadership contest, the King of the North, the coronation, whether actually that could calcify into something a bit more negative around him, whether we start to see him as a kind of distant individual rather than one we're quite close to.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, it's been one of the worries of Andy coming in, for example, of something that we were going to talk about, Manchesterism. He's very tied with the success of Manchesterism. And is he going to bring this with him down south, down to Westminster? How is that going to work? Is there too much of a north-south divide? Are we in the south going to be like, we don't relate? Or, is it actually going to work? Are we actually all feeling in the South that we do need a little bit more togetherness, that we do need a little bit more of a feeling that the government sees us? Because that's one of the things about Manchesterism is that the people felt seen. They felt acknowledged. Manchesterism being primarily vibes, primarily a feel, isn't it? It's a feel rather than something you can put your finger on. Because when you start to dig into the actual numbers of what Burnham achieved while mayor of Manchester, it's not like this wonderful clean slate of amazing achievements. There's some highs, but there are also some lows, and there's some successes, but there's some big failures as well.
And identity is easier in a smaller place. Is that Manchester has a very clear identity around, whether you Man City, Man United, the Stone Roses, the Hacienda Oasis, whatever it is. Britain is obviously by definition a wider net, a more diverse thing. So does he pivot to UKism? Does he try and scale up Manchesterism? Or does it still get called that?
Yeah.
Would it be divisive? Do people down south want Manchesterism, whatever that may mean?
I think the beauty of it is that if somebody goes, that doesn't work here, he'll be like, no, that was just for Manchester. This is the ism part. And if it does work, he can go, yeah, well, because it worked great there, so I'm bringing it down. So I think he has some flexibility with how he uses that phrase and how he clocks up wins and failures. But you're right. And we kind of saw the same thing with Boris. Boris went from being mayor of London to an MP, and he did struggle with that transition of the change of role, of representing a location, of being able to be proud of where you come from. I mean, we come back to the Men's World Cup, of course. It's much easier to be proud in our identities when we are faced with 47 other countries. But when you zoom in on the micro and we see that England is so broken up by so many different identities right now, yeah, I'm not sure if Andy will be able to bring them together.
And what do you make of it being an ism around a place rather than Thatcherism, Blairism, where the politician's name is the foundation of the ideology? With him, he's rooted it in Manchester rather than Burnhamism.
I think partly because, as you just said, Burnhamism, it's not a good word, is it? Burnhamism. You can't have Burnhamism. That's not going to work. It's like, what did he do? Did he set them all on fire? Like Burnhamism. What is that?
Yeah, it does sound like some old medieval policy for witches.
Yeah,
we went through Burnhamism and that was bad.
And that was
moved
bad.
on, yeah.
It's so true. It's an interesting one for me, especially because he comes from Liverpool. And one of the things we all know about is the Liverpool-Manchester identity divide. So here's a man from Liverpool who's managed to win the hearts of the greater Manchester area with great success, even winning a by-election in Makerfield, which contains Wigan, which is still one of the poorest areas that he never was able to raise them up out of poverty as he was promising to do. So he's achieved many great things, and it might be a clever move that he's using Manchesterism as an identity and separating it from himself so that A, if it fails, it wasn't me, it was Manchesterism, but B, if it succeeds, there's still room for him to grow into what Burnhamism might then become. So he's leaving himself open to it, whereas Starmer from the very beginning had to do Starmerism, didn't he? I mean, that was it. And Starmerism failed within 2.5 years, and now that's his legacy.
And actually, interestingly, and this is a crucial difference between them, is Starmer was very resistant to even accept that Starmerism was a thing or that it would exist. You know, he was one of those politicians that you meet, and some of them exist in the Labour Party, say, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want to be seen as old Labour or new Labour. I'm classic Labour. You know, even resisted the idea that Starmerism existed. And I think I understand why politicians are doing that when they're trying to become leader of a party. But it actually helps the public to be clear. You say, okay, you're one of those left-wing Labour people or you're a right-wing Labour person.
Yes.
These are just shorthand phrases that allow the public to go, okay, if you're on the Blairite end, you're going to be pro-business, tough on crime. If you're on the Corbyn end, you're going to have different priorities. And it's not ignoble for the public to want to know where on that actually quite broad spectrum you would sit. And I always got the sense that Keir Starmer didn't want to have that conversation at all, whereas Burnham perhaps a bit more keen to define himself.
I think Burnham is right to want to define himself, but I feel that also he's keen to do it because he has seen from Starmer that by not doing it, it could be your downfall. Because what is Starmerism? U-turns? Like what is it defined by? The winter fuel allowance? I mean, from his leadership race all the way through to now, he keeps changing what Starmerism was. He started on 10 leadership pledges. Then he had 5 national missions. He had 3 strong foundations. He had 6 plan for change milestones, 6 first steps, 4 reset pillars, 3 fiscal tests, 2 chiefs of staff, and 1 poorly chosen ambassador. He went through so many identity shifts, and we're like, just pick a number and stick to it. Usually, actually, we recommend prime numbers, so a lot of these, no wonder they failed. But, you know, what is Starmer? I'm not sure what Starmerism is. I feel like I understand what Manchesterism, which is just a vibe, I understand it better than I understand Starmerism. Like, what is it? What is it?
Yeah, and I don't think people mind the odd relaunch or the reset. You know, if you're getting things wrong, the just cause, people expect that. And obviously, when Tony Blair first came in, you know, he's seen now as a very clearly defined political creed. At the time, his nickname was Bambi. It was all government by focus group. He didn't stand for anything. Actually, history has judged him to be a deeply ideological leader and very single-minded over one particular issue. So I don't think people mind it when you
just
first
the one?
start.
Which one was that? No.
Oh, it was,
what was it?
Something to do with recycling, I think. But over time, politicians can sort of end up in a position, and I don't think people mind that. It's just that I guess you're right. With Starmerism, it never felt like it was coming from somewhere. You know, with Tony Blair, you knew he was a moderniser, so at least you knew he was coming from there. You know, with Corbyn, you understood that he was on the hard left. You know, Thatcher and Major, you sort of understood the traditions they came from.
Yes.
Whereas Keir Starmer, probably more than any other Labour leader in history, was so keen to reject the sense that he was from any particular wing that then I guess who are your allies?
No, well, precisely. And you add to that the number of times that he backtracked or had to U-turn, which I think was inexperience as much as anything. And it actually became the overriding flavor of who he was. As much as I hate to agree with Blair, he wasn't wrong in his 5,000-word essay that he wrote a couple of weeks ago, where he said, you got to stand for something. It doesn't matter who leads the party. You need to stand for something. And I think, again, that's probably been taken to heart by Wes and Andy, which is why they've said we mustn't exaggerate our small differences. And saying small differences, they're not small. They're quite substantial, their differences. But they're recognizing that if the Labour Party doesn't nail down 5 or 7 or 3 things that they are standing for, that they will lose in the next election.
Starmer's language was quite interesting over the years, and I just wonder which bits you might have liked. I mean, there was a phrase he kept using, sticking plaster politics, which I never felt, I understood what he meant. the idea that you don't want these quick fixes, but it never really conveyed the magnitude of the job at hand.
Yes, and it's not something you can shy away from when you only have 5 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all wish we could go back in time and agree with and get Nick Clegg to do this, energy plan that he had, because we'd be close to being complete with it if we'd all gotten behind it. But in 5-year cycles, you can't actually achieve massive change. And I think he needed a few more wins under his belt, a few more sticking plasters needed to go up before he would have had the trust and the faith of people to be able to do deeper changes.
He also said he wanted to mainline AI into the veins of the UK. He also talked about fundamentally rewiring the British state at the tepid bath of managed decline. Am I right that Starmer stole one of your jokes?
Well, I think to be fair, I think his writers did. But I often do Times Radio with Daryl Morris. And I did the show one night. I think it was on a Saturday or Sunday night, midnight to 1 a.m. And we were talking about the plan to reintroduce national service. And I said, it's going to be like a dad's army of teenagers. Like, what is that? What's that going to look like? And then literally the next day, on the Monday, he gave a speech. And he, of course, said, it's going to be like dad's army of teenagers. And I went, that's my joke. Like, what I said that last night. And I messaged Daryl and I said, what is the chances that I say that on the radio and someone else happened to think it over the weekend? And he said, no, they listened to the show. His writers listened to the show, or his advisors. I was like, wow. So I've written for Keir Starmer.
So, I mean, sometimes comedians will have material lifted by other comedians. How does it feel to have been joke-thieved by a world leader?
I mean, it's on my resume because it's all you can do, isn't it? Is claim the right.
Oh, absolutely.
So I've written for Keir Starmer. Yeah.
What do you make of
Keir? Now that you're free, if you have any other writing needs,
you have to do a circuit.
I like to eat, so that's perfect.
Ria, it's a bit of a fan favourite here on Strong Message here. What do you make of the phrase, the tepid bath of managed decline?
I mean, do you know what is the fact that a tepid bath does not change temperature, but decline is a change and tepid isn't? And you go, well, if it's a tepid bath, it's a terrible temperature. And the only way to make it better is to heat it up. But decline is decline. So the only bath that declines is your hot bath as it gets colder.
Yeah.
That's why that never makes sense to me.
And therefore the state must intervene. Turn on the hot tap. Turn on the hot tap of investment. To stimulate the tepid bath of managed decline. The radox of international agreement. To stimulate the bath for all our people.
Well, using your big toe to stem the trickle down.
Or is it just that when it comes out of different people's mouths, it makes us feel different? Had Tony Blair said, the tepid bath of managed decline, would we have said, oh, actually, that's got a real urgency to it. I can see it now, the tepid bath, and I don't want to get in it.
Or we are in it. And, well, do you know, it's interesting. I would have said it's a terrible phrase, but now that you've done it as Tony Blair, I'm like, oh, actually, maybe it is. It's all in the delivery. It's like comedy. It's all in the delivery. I think, though, that Keir Starmer, you know how some people are just tone deaf and they cannot sing no matter what? I think that he's just a little bit tone deaf because you use that other one that I like, which is mainlining AI into the veins of the
mainline AI into the veins of the UK.
Into the veins of the UK. I mean, that's some real forcible language there. That very much sounds against my will as a woman. It very much brings back the argument that the COVID vaccine injected us all with 5G. I just thought it's very poorly chosen to conflate medicine with technology, given that it took us ages to get over convincing people, no, you're not going to suddenly be a radio tower if you get vaccinated.
That is such a good point. That actually, the sort of driver in that sentence actually is actually quite authoritarian.
Yeah, you know, there's no choice about it.
The motivation is this will be imposed into your body.
Yeah.
Against your will.
You know, just shoot me in the head with a chip and get on with it. Like, you know, it really is quite violent.
So what she said, the effervescent tablet of AI that you can choose to dilute in water, whether you like it like a Barocca.
Yes.
You can choose to
the Barocca of AI.
The Barocca of AI.
Okay, let's focus on Farage, we mentioned Tony Blair's essay. Farage's been writing a few as well on his rather grandly titled blog, Essays to Britain. One of the phrases he uses is the uni party, effectively to clump Labour and the Tories together. Do you think that's the sort of attack line that would cut through with the public?
I'll be honest, it is brilliantly chosen as a word. The word uniparty, it's silly, it's frivolous, it brings to mind unicycles and unitards, none of which are serious things. It's a brilliant phrase to achieve what Farage wants to achieve, which is to undermine any kind of seriousness of both the Labour and the Tory party. I can see what he's trying to do in terms of calling them the uni party and saying they're all the same, they're all the same, they're all the same. But I think what Andy's going to be very successful in doing is differentiating them again. In fact, if anything, I think the uniparty is blue, turquoise, turquoise. I think those three parties, Tory, Reform, Restore, those are the ones that I'm like, I can't tell where one of you ends and one of you begins. You are not discrete colors. You are definitely a Dulux color chart of just blending together.
That's a really good point. Given the sheer amount of Tory defectors he's received, to accuse any other party of, or any other two parties of being homogenous, you've got a bit of a cheat. The Lib Dems tried this in 2010 when they were the challenger brand of that election. They did a campaign called Labservative where they put together the logos of the Labour Party and the Tory Party. So it was the Tory Party tree with the Labour Party stem, and they did these party political broadcasts, the Labservative Party. This idea that it's always one of these two that wins, and let's give them a bit of a kicking. So it's a strategy, and they did all right in that election. They ended up in government on the back of their showing. So
they did.
Maybe Farage
How did that go for them? Did that?
You could argue they didn't manage the victory as well as they managed the campaign. But maybe Farage just looked at that and thought, you know what, that's a strategy that worked for Clegg. Maybe I'll copy it.
Labservative, though, it just sounds like a new breed of dog that's going to be seen at Crufts, doesn't it? What have you got? I've got a Labservative. Yeah, no, it's hypoallergenic.
Well, that brings us almost to the end. We need some words for the furnace.
Well, it's your first time hosting, so I think you must have some words for the furnace.
The one that has crept in, and I first noticed it after the election, particularly on social media with newly elected Labour MPs, all of them say, it is the honour of my life. It's the honour of my life to be the new MP for Bakersfield and whatever it is. It's the honour of my life to serve the people of this. And they all say it now. It's the honour of my life to have been Prime Minister. The honour of my life to have been asked to... think, you know what I don't understand about it? Why would you want to say the same thing as everyone else? Wouldn't you want to stand out and differentiate? And I've never understood why you would want to follow trends in language, because then you just become part of the blob. Pick a new form of words. Show that you can express yourself rather than just copy and paste. The honour of my life.
Yeah, but don't you also find sometimes as a comedian that when you're too far out there, nobody comes with you?
Frequently, yeah. Thanks for listening to Strong Message here. It's been the honour of my life to host this show. Armando will be back next week. Make sure you subscribe to Strong Message here on BBC Sounds. And while you're there, why not listen to my show, the Matt Forde Focus Group, which on occasion also features the fantastic Ria Lina. Thanks for having me. Goodbye.
Goodbye.